Greetings, this is Griff Ruby, the Nostalgia Catholic, with another Isaac Asimov short story review. And once again, as with the previous story, it is included on the pages of Scientific American, not a noted venue for science fiction, but very much a place where his story has already once been welcomed, and now another story is welcomed again. This time in the October 1962 edition. So, this story is contained on pages 76 and 77, and it is called Starlight. So, it has Starlight. There's a little bit of a blurb that tells something. You can barely see that it says that he wrote it, but it is there. It says, hard to see, by Isaac Asimov in faint yellow, but it's there. Okay. And the little blurb on here says, Number 6 in a series of science fiction originals created expressly for Hoffman Electronics Corporation. So once again, our old good friend Hoffman is having advertisements in which they want to have science fiction writers write original short stories, very short stories, to put in their advertisements. I'm also told that these advertisements were seen not only in Scientific American, but at least one other magazine, Fortune magazine. Yeah, as in like the Fortune 500 type of thing. It's a business type magazine. And may have appeared in other magazines, the names of which I do not know and cannot be certain if any such actually existed. But it is in these Scientific Americans, which just kind of seem the most fun to procure. I think it's easier to find old back issues of Scientific American than Fortune anyway. So now this story is called Starlight. Now, this one is somewhat different. The other was clearly science fiction, and so it's gathered with the nightfall. This one is categorized as a mystery, and so is therefore gathered up with Asimov's mysteries. Now, inside the story, there's the dash thing seems to have been resolved, if indeed they have dashes. I'm sure they do. Oh, well, there's one. There's just a single dash now, and there's another one. So now the dash issue has been resolved. However, on the other hand, there's a couple of places where there's minor typeface differences. In one place, something goes from no in 2 all capital letters to becoming just an italicized big N little o. And there's an exclamation point in each case. There's another place where a short phrase, somebody was able to steal something, and in the original this was parenthetically included, literally parenthesis, it says, he had no difficulty, for he was a greatly trusted man. Instead of parentheses, that is separated by a pair of dashes in the book. But other than that, there seem to be no real differences in the text. So, what do we have here, artistically speaking? Well, in this case, we have one piece of artwork. Here is this fellow in some kind of a spacesuit, and kind of a vague and ambiguous surrounding. The only thing I can say with any real certainty is he does not look too cheerful. I will leave it at that because that's probably the story. There's a tiny little hand drawing up here, which I'm not sure whether this is meant to relate to the story, but it's got little little constellations and so forth, like a map of the sky from constellations. This is relevant to the story. And once again, as before, the whole first page is occupied with the beginning of his story, and again, a large piece of artwork. The second page continues and finishes the story, all but the final column, which is reserved for their advertisement. In this case, the advertisement actually has some additional material that's kind of relevant to the story, in a way. So I will have to include that. So, because when we get it into the story, besides those trivial changes to the text I mentioned, you of course lose any of the little blurbs, you lose the artwork, and you lose the commentary on the story that heads off the advertisement for some product of Hoffman Electronics. But we get ahead of ourselves. Let's look at the story in this case. Here you have a person who wants to steal an immensely valuable material, some element, called Krillium. Krillium, K-R-I-L-L-I-U-M. Maybe it's a new element. Sounds neat. Sounds pretty cool. But anyway, so he's got a bunch of Krillium, enough to make millions and millions of dollars. And he's willing to steal it. He's willing to kill for it. And in fact, he's got a little simpatico partner who's older than him and spent years and years preparing for this very thing by building a database of all the stars and where they are and what type of star they are and what their spectral analysis are and so forth. And then what's going to happen is he's going to flee the police by using the jump. The jump is going to put it somewhere out in some random part of the galaxy, hopefully not too far away. And, but hopefully not too close where they might find him, but not so far away that, say, he's way out in space between galaxies or who knows where, And, or what could also be pretty disastrous, it wouldn't be very pleasant for him if he happened to land in the middle of the sun or something. So, but all of those are very, very absurdly unlikely. So, and I'll just subtly spoil it partially by saying none of those things happen. But of course, he's done a dishonest thing. His partner, as I said, was a much older man who had spent years building this great computer and filling it with all the databases about the star and the programming that you just tell it to go do something, and all it does is go find a star that it recognizes, and then from there start looking for other stars that it recognizes by their spectral quality until eventually you can figure out where it is. Which, by the way, does get discussed in some later works. I think we see that either somewhere in the Foundation series or the Galactic Era series, or maybe even Foundation's Edge or Foundation Earth. It's one of those Galactic Era books that he wrote, and off the top of my head I don't remember which one, where this is apparently a standard procedure to use for figuring out you're navigating yourself as you do these jumps through space, and especially if you can't be totally certain where exactly you landed. So, anyway, he gets this valuable Krillium from the old man, and there's a line here that's almost kind of, let's see here. Alright, the chances for getting, any of those things going wrong is nowhere near as big as the chance that you might, at the same moment, just happen to have a heart attack. Okay. So, the chances for that you having a heart attack are much higher. And then he comes together, well, you might, Mr. Brennmayer, that's the name of the older man. You're older. The old man shrugged. I don't count. The computer will do everything automatically. Trent nodded and remembered that. One midnight, when the ship was ready and Brennmayer arrived with the Krillium in a briefcase, and here's our parenthetic statement here, he had no difficulty, for he was a greatly trusted man. Trent took the briefcase with one hand, while his other moved quickly and surely. A knife was still the best, just as quick as a molecular depolarizer, just as fatal and much more quiet. Trent left the knife there with the body, complete with fingerprints. What was the difference? They wouldn't get him. And they don't get him. At least they don't get him. I have to give it that. So, he killed Brennmayer. This guy's named Arthur Trent. Okay, that's his name, by the way. I said Arthur Dent. But Arthur Dent is no criminal. This guy is pretty evil. He kind of deserves to have something go wrong. In a nice kind of cosmic justice that you find in stories, unlike, which isn't so reliably so in real life, but in stories it's virtually always so. The kind of justice you find. He puts this thing in a gear, he goes through the jump, and he lands to part of the galaxy, and he lets the computer work at trying to figure out where he is. And I don't want to spoil the story. It does not work out, needless to say. But one of the things is, he is stranded. It ends with him wishing he had pulled the knife out of the guy and brought it along. Because he's going to die a slow death as his capsule runs out of air or water or food or something, but probably air first. And he can't even find a habitable planet for, well, I've almost given half of it away. But I'll leave what the half of it was exactly, and it leaves him unable to do that. And so it ends with him wishing. The last sentence is, helplessly, Trent slumped in his chair, watching the mocking pattern of starlight and beginning the long and agonized wait for death. If he had only kept the knife. Now, I bring that up because the bit of it about Hoffman's own advertisement about their product begins in response to this. The caption reads, "How science fiction becomes scientific fact." There's that. And the part next reads this. "Thank goodness Trent left the knife. Neither we nor Dr. Asimov would care to have that sort of thing on our conscience." But in a mood quite different from that in which Trent earned notoriety, we at Hoffman are happy to report that some of the things we've been busy at are now gaining favorable recognition in a variety of areas. No less spectacular than the navigation feat in Starlight. I mean, this whole thing, how this computer works and how it does work so nicely in so many places where spacecraft jump all over the galaxy. The Galactic Era, they do that, as do they also in the Foundation series, all those books. See, anyway, so no less spectacular than the navigation feat in Starlight, when viewed as current accomplishment, is the performance of the Hoffman, and then it starts talking about these different Hoffman products. And interestingly enough, one of them is using solar cell converted energy, which it can get enough for what it needs from a mere 5 minutes of sunlight. That's pretty good. Oh, it also comes with batteries capable of carrying a charge as long as 60 days too, so it's not going to run out of power. Oh, I did mention Santa Barbara in the previous installment. Less down to earth, the minds of our men at Hoffman Science Center, high on a hill overlooking Santa Barbara. They are hard at work striving towards such things as solar cell power system, which would serve our country's first men on the moon, as well on developing laser communication systems that will let these heroes report back to less venturesome souls on this planet. So, these people are really up to some neat stuff. If you have a problem that might relate to what we do, call us. And again, it has their name and their address. It doesn't have their phone number. I'm not sure how we're supposed to call them. Anyway, so that's the Hoffman advertisement. And that, along with the previous story, both of which were on the pages of Scientific American. This was the 6th of the series, by the way. We don't know if there's any more. He said there's about half a dozen, so this might be the last, or at least almost the last of these installments from some science fiction author. They don't seem to have carried into the next year. At any rate, these two stories of his, very short stories each, literally comprise the total sum of fiction that he published in 1962. As I mentioned briefly at the end of the previous one, he will publish no stories in 1963. Not one. He won't even write one in 1963. In 1964, he will not write any stories. Except that he will publish one old story, and that will be the next one we talk about in our next installment. But for the meantime, he was down to 2 a year and 2 a year for this and the previous year, and then 2 years with only one, and that's it. Although, like I said, it was also time for him to republish his iRobot and Foundation series on Doubleday, having carried them for however long on the known press, that imprint that barely even existed anymore. So, at any rate, that's the state of his fiction at that time, and thank you for listening.